Cheers, Rockets fans. Welcome to The Locker Line, an exclusive podcast from the home of the Rockets.
Whoa!
Sports Talk 790.
Rockets!
The Locker Line is proudly served to you by Carbox Clutch City Lager.
It is good!
Oh, yeah? Red Nation, get ready. Get ready. The Locker Line starts now.
Welcome aboard.
Ben Dubose here, Paulo Alves there. Thanks for checking out another new episode of The Lager Line. As always, served to you courtesy of Clutch City Lager of Karbach Brewing. As we're recording this in mid-September during the dog days of the NBA calendar, we've got a special guest, Vanessa Richardson, sideline reporter for the Houston Rockets on Space City Home Network. And Vanessa, it's a good time to have you on. I've wanted to get you for a while, but we're now approaching your 2-year anniversary with the Rockets, correct?
Yes, correct. And I'm just like, it's hard to believe, but I just feel so fortunate because it has been so much fun.
Yeah, it looks like you're having fun when you do these broadcasts. And of course, last year was a lot more fun than the first year with the team winning a lot more games. But one thing I wanted to start off by asking you, so you're not a newcomer to the Houston sports media space. You had worked with Houston's NBC affiliate, KPRC, for a few years. You had done almost a year with ESPN 97.5 doing sports talk radio. So you had some exposure to the Rockets and the Houston sports teams before taking this job, yet everything you saw was as something of an outsider. Now, the last couple of years, you've been sort of the ultimate insider in that you are the link between fans as the team. You travel with the team. You do nearly every game. What have you learned about this team and this franchise in your 2 years as the ultimate insider that's maybe different than your perception over all those years when you were an outsider in Houston sports media?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. You both know how I feel about you and just love the way that you guys cover the Rockets. It's different when you're with a non-affiliate. And, you know, when I was with KPRC, I was obviously not only covering the Rockets, but the Texans, the Astros, college football. We did a Friday night high school football show, so it was a lot. And then when I was with 97.5, Now Media, or ESPN Radio, which I loved, you know, that was a lot of football, and it was only a 2-hour show a day. So a lot of times, you know, we wouldn't get to talk about as much basketball as I would have liked. So it is definitely different, and in a great way. I love the privilege of being the person that can interview these players after, you know, some of their biggest career moments, and for the guys that are young, some of their biggest life moments, and getting to be with them on the road and see their hard work and meet their families and how much their families have poured into them. It's just been really incredible. So I feel super thankful. And, you know, if you ask me what I've learned about the Rockets franchise, I would just say really good people behind the scenes. And that includes, of course, the Fertittas and Rafael Stone. But, you know, there's a lot of amazing women that work in the franchise and, you know, that you never see. And it's just a franchise full of really good people that I think are trying to do things the right way. And it's been cool last season to see a lot of those things come to fruition, and the hard work and the painful years turn into a season that fans were proud of.
I think those good vibes and the fact that you have good people behind the scenes definitely translates to, just as someone who watches, obviously, those vibes definitely translate to the outside as well. So obviously your first year with the team, we were basically tanking, or we weren't good. They'll claim that they weren't tanking, but they kind of were. And then your second year, we were obviously, around 500. We were fighting for the playoffs for a bit. And now, hopefully this year, we're going to have a better team. How was the difference between when the team was, down bad versus when they were, on the rise?
Oh my gosh. I mean, and this is nothing against, the former head coach of the Rockets, Stephen Silas. This is nothing against that staff and nothing against the players. The situation was what it was, right? But when I went to Summer League last season, so 2023 summer, I got to see my first practice run by Ime Udoka and his staff. And I was like, whoa. I mean, it was a 180 in culture. It was accountability, it was discipline, it was, and look, the best thing about Ime is like, he doesn't, like, I can report that because he literally will say it at the press conference, right? If you're not playing defense, no matter who you are, you're not playing. And if you're not giving effort, you're going to be on the bench. And so to see that shift 180 essentially overnight was incredible. And he brought in a staff of people, Ben Sullivan, Royale Ivy, Tiago Splitter has left for Paris, but Tiago was a huge part of the staff. And, it's the reason that I was so excited to do that Meet the Coaches series is because it's just a really great staff full of young, hungry guys that all played, high-level college. Most of them played professionally overseas or in the NBA. And so it just was a 180 immediately. And, what a testament to the Rockets, too, because it's these players, obviously, that Rafael picked and that he and his staff scouted. And you get the Tari Easons and you get the players that are just evolving into something that's really cool to see on a night-to-night basis. And so it was really cool to see that from the get-go. And it's not the change was immediately apparent.
And I'll note that Coaches series, obviously, it airs on Rockets All Access on Space City Home Network. But if you're not in the Houston market, you've got those videos at Vanessa Richardson Media, your YouTube channel, correct?
Yeah, at the YouTube channel. Yeah. So we've gotten to speak to Ben Sullivan, Royale Ivy, Tiago Splitter, Garrett Jackson, and then we just finished with Cam Hodges, and Cam, was in Turkey with Aprin for 7 weeks this summer, and then of course we have some coaches that we haven't gotten to yet. So between the coaches, the guys that are player development, there are a lot of really important pieces to this franchise. And I really enjoy getting to shed a light on those guys and show that to fans.
In terms of that shift in culture, so Ime Udoka was a big part of it, but so too were the players they brought in late June, early July of 2023. And this is no disrespect intended at all to Eric Gordon, who is basically the lone veteran on that 22 to 23 team the first year that you were in Houston. And also he was the lone veteran, and he had a little bit of a contractual dispute at that time. There was uncertainty on whether he would stay with the team. Obviously, he did end up getting traded at that season's trade deadline. And so even though I do think Eric Gordon certainly was a veteran, also brought a defensive presence, at the same time, when you're just one of 11, one of 14, whatever it may be, then it's pretty tough for that to shift the overall culture. As opposed to last year, it's not just Ime, but you bring in Fred, you bring in Dylan, you sign Jeff Green, Jock Landale, guys that have been there, done that. You draft Amin Thompson, even though he was a rookie. Amin brought a defensive culture vibe day one. That's just the player that he is. How much did those additions sort of shape not just the on-court product, but the vibe off the court as well? Because it just feels like if you're one of those young guys, and, it's not like we're calling out any of the young players, because lots of young NBA players struggle on defense when they're first getting started in the league. That comes with the territory. But all of a sudden, if everyone around you, like Fred, like Dylan, like Jeff, if they're competing their butts off every possession, it becomes a lot harder if you're Jalen Green, if you're Alperen Şengün, to take a possession off. And so nobody wants to be the weak link. So how much did those guys that were brought in play a role in, changing the culture and helping hold everyone to that higher standard?
Yeah, it was huge. And I think people think, oh, well, every veteran mentors young players. Like, what's across sports, I could think of examples like Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, where that's not true. Like, not every veteran is going to take young guys under their wings. And the impact that Jeff Green had on Jabari Smith Jr. and Tari Eason, and the impact that Fred VanVleet had on just the element of professionalism alone was huge. And then you have Dylan Brooks, who comes in with a lot of intensity. And people can say whatever they want about Dylan, but he holds his teammates to a high standard. And, Jock Landale was an underrated piece of that veteran leadership. And the way
people loved him.
Yeah. And the way he stepped up when Alfie got hurt, and just with a lot of humility said, I mean, he even said it to me post game, I believe, in San Antonio. He said, nobody can replace Alfie, but, I'm trying to do the best I can. And just what a great example the veterans set. And now something that I know Rafael and Ime and the Fertittas really wanted was strong veteran leadership. And think about everything that Reed Shefford is going to be able to learn from Fred. You just can't say enough about the veterans. You really can't.
Another thing that shifted between your first and second seasons was the launch of Space City Home Network. The channel used to be AT&T Sportsnet Southwest, and so a lot of people didn't necessarily notice the shift other than the branding, because obviously the carriage agreements with DirecTV, with Comcast, with Uverse, whoever the providers may be, are still in place. However, Space City Home Network, unlike the previous AT&T Sportsnet RSN, Space City Home Network is actually owned fully by the Rockets and the Astros. And so there's a little more team control. And so we talked about that coaches series earlier. I think that's something that's newer in part because you do have a little more off-season content with Space City. How much of a difference has that made with the overall coverage that you can provide now that the RSN is, not that there wasn't a team stake before, but there's a much larger stake with the teams, the Rockets and the Astros now?
It's so nice of you to notice that because, like you said, there's always been the affiliation and the teams care about what is on Space City Home Network. But now, Tilman Fertitta and Jen Crane own the network. It is really cool to see that partnership grow even more. And so we did some things last year, like my Meet the Coaches series, or, we mic'd up players, and Rockets fans absolutely loved that. So I'm looking forward to seeing that partnership continue to grow since we are under that ownership now. And, I can't say anything specific, but I think fans should be very excited about the future and also thankful because if anybody knows anything about the regional network landscape, there are a lot of fan bases that are wondering, where am I going to be able to watch my team? Who is going to own it? There are things happening, in court with different. So the fact that Tilman Fertitta and Jim Crane took matters into their own hands and the people that work with them as well and said, let's learn how to run a regional network. In addition to all of the other responsibilities we have, let's learn how to run a regional network. And that's incredible. And it is a service to the fans. And I think Rockets and Astros fans, like you said, Ben, like those kind words, I do think that they're noticing that the content is even better. So again, I can't say anything specifically, but we're going to have some really fun things coming up this season for sure.
So since you began with the team with the Houston Rockets, what was the moment you were most nervous before, either going live or having an interview scheduled? What was the moment that you were the most, nervous for throughout the first few years that you've been with the Rockets?
Oh, most nervous. I would say that's a really good one. Fortunately, I worked in TV long enough to where I don't usually get into a pile of nerves, but I would just say, any time we're about to go on and it's an important moment, a player's career high or, reporting something that I want to get right, every now and then I get some butterflies. So, there have been a lot of really fun interviews that I've done. And, I don't know that I have one for that. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's definitely cool because so we see obviously more of the finished product and obviously have a lot of experience going into it. And it always, comes across like everything is under control. And sometimes I think people forget that,
No, it's true. No. And it's funny you say that because like there's more that goes into a moment than people think. So, for a post-game interview, I'm telling Rockets security and Rockets public relations who I'd like to get. And then I'm talking to my producer in the truck, and then the producer is telling the graphics guy and the director, okay, Vanessa's going to get him in. Let's get his score bug ready with how many points and rebounds and assists he had. And then I'm telling the cameraman, hey, I'm going to get that ready. And then, it's more complicated than people think.
So from the people that you've gotten to interview so far, who are your favorite people to interview? You can name players, coaches, whoever you want. Who are the best interviews out of the squad?
I don't know that I can say best without sounding biased, but I think,
Let me rephrase that a little bit. What interviews have stood out the most to you from your first couple of years?
Okay, yes. I did one with Jabari after the Rockets won in Oklahoma City, and it was, I believe, their 10th win in a row. And it was great for a couple of different reasons. Those 10 wins came in different ways, which I thought was really important. And that win in particular was a team win, if I've ever seen it. But it was also symbolic of where the Rockets are. It was also symbolic about the fact that this team is heading in the right direction. You don't go on a 10-game win streak. I don't care what people say. You don't go on a 10-game win streak out of nowhere. And you don't increase the win total like they did by coincidence. So that was just a special night. I remember Tilman and Patrick Fertitta waiting outside of the locker room.
Oh, yeah. I remember the video. Yeah.
Yeah. And I took that video, and Tilman shook the hand of every Rockets coach. And it was just pure joy of like, this is going in the right direction. We made the right hires. We brought in the right veterans. And obviously that's what I'm thinking. I'm not saying that's what Tilman was thinking, but it was just incredible to see 10 wins in a row, that progress at that night against Oklahoma freaking City. It was just really special. And I think it was indicative and special to me too, also because, people can say whatever they want about Jabari. Jabari is a good NBA player and is going to continue to develop. And I want everybody to get their shine, and I want fans to see how hard all of these guys work and how dedicated they are. And so that win was special for sure.
Yeah, I think Jabari is a guy who's sort of symbolic for this whole era of the rebuild going from phase 1 to phase 2, because obviously year 1 was a little rockier than some of us expected. Perhaps we should have expected it when you look at, even if he was drafted 3rd, he's actually like the youngest guy in his entire draft class. He had just turned 19 going into the NBA, and, he's a little thin, or was at least, for his position. So, of course, there were going to be some ups and downs, getting used to the longer three-point line. And so to see him take a big leap in year 2, actually low-key one of the better moments of, I would say, the last 2 seasons. Obviously, last year had a ton, with the Oklahoma City game, I think, being at the top of the list. But I would say year 1, that St. Patrick's Day game when Jabari had the buzzer beater against the Pelicans. It was right after, I'm sure you remember, you're from Indiana, and so he had that huge game against the Pacers, in Indy a couple of games before that. And so it was sort of, you could see in real time the light bulb coming on. And I think, unlike this past season, that March was one in which we were sort of ready for the offseason, because we knew that, that was going to be turning the page. The Ime hire, well, we didn't know it was Ime, but we knew, more than likely a new coach was coming. There was going to be new leadership. They had all this cap space so they could bring in additions, which that became Fred and Dylan. And we just knew that things were going to get kicked into overdrive. And obviously last year was the result of that. But Jabari having those flashes towards the end of the year, and I think he had a nice interview with you after that game as well, was just sort of the light bulb coming on, and you could sort of see the light at the end of the tunnel if you're a fan. And so that stood out with me. Another guy that I think his interviews with you are always fantastic is Alperen Sengun. I think certainly everybody remembers the 45 points he had against Wemby, the San Antonio game in March. I also think of the New Orleans game. He had a career high 36 or 37, but that was the walk-off interview right before Christmas where Tari joined him and made, and did the All-Star. Yeah, so that was good. But one of the things that always makes the All-P interviews, and I'm curious your perspective on this, one of the things that always makes them so memorable. So he has done amazing work in his first 3 NBA seasons at learning English. Everyone knows the basics, but he's gone from just being able to listen to his teammates and hear signals from coaches to being able to communicate just like we do as people born in the States. He's gotten really, really good at it. It actually reminds me a little bit of, with the Astros, a big part of their culture. They had so many Latin American infielders, and a few years back, Alex Bregman went the extra mile to become fluent in Spanish so that he could communicate with them. And that's been a huge part in sort of, building that culture. And Sengun getting to a point where he's not just, understanding basic commands in English, but is literally one of the guys.
Yeah.
That really helps him in the locker room. And also, it's funny, but so to tie it back into your interviews, so with him in sort of the process, every year he gets a little bit better, but it's still a process of getting to, where we are as English speakers. His interviews can be a little more blunt. So whereas some guys sort of, choose their words carefully, Şengün, I feel like he has less of a filter because he's still learning the language. So the All-P interviews are really, really blunt. And so just for that selfish reason, I like All-P's interviews just because he's so blunt. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And yeah, no, I think it's a great point, Ben, because honestly, I don't think people understand how hard it is for these players to come over to the US, learn a different language. Mind you, they are away from their family, away from their friends, away from everything that is comfortable to them. And they still take the time to learn the language. And then you also have to learn the slang. And because slang is a big part of any locker room, it's a big part of life in general. And so I'm really proud of everything that Alfred has done. And, the resources that the Rockets gave him to learn has been fantastic. And, it's a vulnerable thing to put yourself out there. It is a vulnerable thing to do an interview in a language that isn't your first language, and to do that interview in front of thousands and thousands of people that are watching. That's a lot. And, he is very honest and very blunt, but he's so thoughtful, and all the hard work he's put in this past summer with the guys and the player development guys that the Rockets sent to Turkey, I think is going to just do wonders for him. So I'm really excited for Alfie.
Yeah, absolutely. And while we're on the subject of the Rockets, we've talked a lot about players, but you get some behind the scenes access to the leaders of the organization as well. And I'm curious your perspective on Rafael and Ime in particular, because it feels like to me those two have been a really nice mix. And it's not to say that Rafael and Steven weren't, but I think, and of course this was before your time, it's important to remember when Stephen Silas was hired in late 2020, circumstances were very different. For starters, during a lot of that coaching search, which was right after the bubble in September of 2020, Daryl Morey had not even officially left. Now, he knew he was going to, and so as I understand it, he was sitting in on the meetings, but Rafael was sort of leading them. But Rafael wasn't even fully in that chair yet. And then more importantly, at the time, the Rockets still had James Harden and Russell Westbrook, two former MVPs, under contract. They were hoping to make things work with James. It was a veteran-laden team. There were hopes that Steven and James could be something similar to what Steven did with Luka in Dallas in terms of being sort of the heliocentric hub of the offense. And then everything flipped to, it felt like a rebuild overnight in early 2021. So it's not so much to say that Rafael and Stephen Silas were a bad fit. It's more, in my opinion, the circumstances changed dramatically within a span of a few months from when Stephen Silas was hired, and then the job became much more difficult than anyone anticipated. However, with the second hire, which took place in April of 2023, when Rafael Stone was fully in charge, knew the situation, had a plan for what things would look like moving forward, it really feels like that mix of Rafael and Ime has been extremely productive. What's your assessment of, I guess, their personalities, knowing them behind the scenes, and why do they seem to, work so well together as far as being in alignment between the front office and the coaching staff?
Yeah, look, I can't speak for either one of them, obviously, but just from what I've seen, I do think that they get along really well. And I think that the main thing that has been said, and it might sound cliche or it might sound like I'm reading from a PR sheet, but it's 100% true, is that everybody has the same vision of where the franchise is, where it needs to be, where they want to go next. When Ime was hired, you heard Tilman say we are in phase 2. And so I just think that everybody is on the same page about the importance of veterans, about the importance of drafting well, and they're working well together. And I think that it is obvious to fans. And I don't know what sport you're talking about. I don't know what team you're talking about. When you feel like the owner, the GM, the coach, the coaching staff, the president, the business ops, when you feel like everybody is on the same page and there is no friction and there's no drama and there's no reports coming out and who's leaking this, and, when you just feel like everything is in tandem, that's a great feeling as a fan. And I think Rockets fans should have that feeling. So, they're both basketball junkies, and obviously they both Rafael and Ime have so much experience in the game and in the NBA. Rafael's been with the Rockets for so long, and then Ime, not only played, but coached for Popovich, and then bouncing around the different stops before he, of course, got this head coaching job. One that he earned would be an understatement. He's been fantastic with the guys. So I think anytime in a corporation, or especially in sports, when you feel like the owner, the GM, the president, the coach, the staff, everybody is on the same page and has a shared vision, as a fan, you have to feel thankful for that, because there are not a lot of situations like that in sports, as we all know.
Yeah. And to quickly follow up on that, one thing that I've noticed with both of them, they both have a certain intensity to them. They take their jobs very seriously, but they also know when they need to pull back. And it's not that uncommon to see, Ime crack a joke with a wry smile. Like, while he's intense, he knows the value of relationships. I've talked with Rafael about that as well. And, I thought there was a really revealing quote this week. So Kelly Iko at The Athletic did a story on the death of Carol Dawson, longtime Rocket assistant coach, former general manager. So rest in peace, and obviously well wishes to his family.
Absolutely.
But the quote that Rafael had to Kelly in that, he's a Houston Rockets legend. I'm lucky to have had the chance to get to know and work with him. He's someone I learned a lot from, particularly his ability to use humor to make his point and connect with people. That's a timeless quality that not many people possess, and it was cool to get the chance to observe. And that's something that low-key, I think the Rockets are better at than people on the outside.
And people think 100%.
Yeah,
yep.
Like Rafael, it comes across in these extended interviews, like you're one of the only people that gets to sit down with them. Those of us that are in the scrums, so to speak, like we'll get to ask a couple of questions here or there. You're one of the only people that gets to talk to them for, extended periods, sometimes for 10, 15 minutes. You get to sit down and talk to them. And while they're serious, at the same time, like, they know when to turn on the other side of their personality as well. And that's an important part of, connecting with players, right?
Well, I appreciate that. And I definitely think, especially within the last couple months of the season, you definitely saw, first of all, they're both very honest people and they will shoot you straight. But yes, they understand relationships. And when I did my interview with Ben Sullivan, who of course is the lead assistant, who's, well known for being really good with helping players get their shot right, who learned under Chip England, all of that wonderful, those abilities that the Rockets are really reaping the benefits from. When I did my Meet the Coaches series with Ben Sullivan, I asked him, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was something like, when you get a player and you're trying to help him with his shot, what do you start with? Do you start with the mechanics? Do you start with the stats, blah, blah, blah? And Ben said, you start with the relationship. And that is honestly, I think, a mindset that Ime has, that Rafael has. Look, they're both very professional and they are very intense. But I can just tell you, as somebody that is at practices and at shoot-arounds, there are really fun sides to them. And, I think that the Rockets are in a really great spot right now, in large part thanks, obviously, to those two and the way that they work well together, for sure.
You've talked about multiple parts of your job. I'm wondering, on any given game day, preferably maybe a home game, what does a day in the life of Vanessa Richardson look like?
I always love this question because it's like usually not what people think. So I go to shoot around, which is in the morning. I finalize, whatever interviews I need to do or nuggets of information that I would like for that night. I usually try to get one or two guys off to the side so that I could have something beyond just what the players have told all of the media, because if I'm just regurgitating that, I'm not adding anything to the broadcast. So I usually get one or two players off to the side, and then I go back to the hotel. I try to get a workout in, and I finalize my notes for the game. So by then we know, for the most part, we have a good idea of who will be playing and who will not be playing. And then I do a phone call with my producer and we discuss some of the big storylines of that game. I, of course, shower, get ready, and then head to the arena. And we do a pregame press conference with Coach Udoka. And then there's the visiting coaches press conference. And then, of course, we have our pregame show on Space City Home Network that is led by Kevin Eschenberger, Kevin Lofi. Gerald Green makes appearances on that as well. And sometimes I'll do a hit for the pregame show and talk about some of the big topics of the game. I can go back to the locker room if I want to and talk to some guys, but for the most part, usually by then I have everything I need and I don't want to bug the guys. So I tend to just kind of leave them be. And then obviously tip-offs, I can do sign quote interview with a coach. And then, of course, if we win, I do a post-game interview. Then we do a post-game press conference with Ime Udoka and go to the locker room and get interviews post-game. And those air, of course, on our post-game show on Space City Home Network. And then depending on if it's a road game, we typically go home right after the game or go on to the next city, which is, can be crazy. It can mean we're getting in at 3 a.m. or whatever. If it's a home game, obviously, I just go home. So I try to, build in some time as well to help post the interviews that we do or, engage with fans. But yeah, game day is always a lot, but obviously I would not change it.
And on the subject of travel, one thing I want to underscore. So a couple of years ago, I believe it was your first season that the Rockets got their own plane, correct?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
And it's so nice. Like, it's ridiculous. Yeah, and the Rockets are one of the only teams that fully owns, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Most teams charter, which is where you have a United or a Southwest plane and you're the only ones on it and you still leave from a private airport, but it's but the private plane is unbelievable.
And I want to highlight that because this is not, the only Tilman Fertitta investment the last couple of years. You've got that. Obviously, the new practice facility is it's been unofficially open for a few months now. We know players have been working out there in the offseason, but officially it's going to open up October 1st when training camp starts. So you've got the new practice facility, way larger, way more infrastructure. You've got, obviously, a top-shelf coaching staff. We've talked about Ime ad nauseum on this pod, and for good reasons. He's one of the best coaches in the NBA. Yeah, and so while you do have a salary cap on the roster in the NBA, you do not have a salary cap on some of these other things like the, the travel, the practice facility, the coaching staff. It just comes down to what ownership is willing to invest. And it feels like, especially the last couple of years, like Tilman Fertitta has done a really nice job of investing around the margins, doing the little things that make this franchise, attractive to people around the league, right?
Oh my gosh. I mean, a $70 million practice facility, which is what, Tilman Fertitta said at that press conference, a 767 private aircraft. And that means that the seats, you can extend them all the way back, that the players have room for their legs. There are couches that they can sleep on. It is just such a comfortable way to travel. You have the team sending 3 player development guys to Turkey for 3 weeks to train with Alperen Şengün. There has been so much investment. It has been well thought out. It has been very intentional. Nothing is random. Nothing is just, hey, we should try this. It is well thought out. And the practice facility is unbelievable. And the players are already loving it. The staff is already, I'm sure, loving it. But that word investment, I think, is really important because there are owners of sports teams that just skate on by and don't seem like they're involved or like they care. Tilman, his son Patrick, and that entire family, they genuinely care about winning. They care about Houston. And, think about what that practice facility can do for free agents.
Right.
Houston is already a desirable place. People love Houston. They love the food. They love the culture. The whole tax situation in Texas doesn't hurt. And now you have a state-of-the-art practice facility. And you'll be traveling on a private plane. You have a team that is on the up and up and has unbelievable young players. And it's just, I think that the franchise is such a good spot. And that was because of, as you said, a myriad of factors. Great coaching, great veteran additions, but also these investments that Tilman Fertitta has made.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier, but just want to highlight Space City Home Network is another one of those investments. Obviously, there's things the teams are willing and able to do now that they were not able to do before, since they have control of that network. It's to build a better fan experience. And of course, you build a better relationship with the fans, then that benefits the team in a myriad of ways. So before we go back to talking about the Rockets and some more basketball specific items of discussion, we talked about the travel, we talked about day in the life. One little fun thing I've got to ask you about. So when you're on the road, there's a small group these days, even including media, that go on the trips. Now, traditional media, you have Jonathan Fagan from the Chronicle at most of the games, but he does not travel on the team plane. He's going coach. So for the most part on the road these days, because economics and the media industry are what they are, it's the team broadcasters that are there on an every game basis. And so there's a certain kinship that comes from that. Obviously,
Absolutely.
Yourself, Craig Ackerman, Ryan Hollins, Matt Thomas on the radio side. There's a few other people within the Rockets that we won't mention here because obviously our audience probably doesn't know who they are.
Right.
But the more forward-facing roles, people like you and Craig and Matt and Ryan that our audience knows because they see or listen to on a frequent basis. When you go on these trips and it's just you guys, it's not like in Houston where, you go to the arena, but then when you're at the arena, you can go home. Like you've got each other and not much else. So obviously there's a lot of time to kill. There's a lot of bonding, a lot of, might be some annoying things in there too, but let's stay on the fun side. Give me one quirky thing about each of those other three broadcasters, Craig, Matt, and Ryan, that people might not know that you have learned about them from your travels the last couple of years.
Okay. I love this. And let me just start by saying I work with the best and most supportive men. Matt Thomas is my seat buddy. So he and I sit next to each other on the plane. Fun fact about Matt Thomas. Matt loves 1970s music. He loves 1980s music. And I think his cutoff is 1992. He does not, when I tell you that he'll show me the songs he's listening to and it's all, the Eagles, Sonny and Cher, Kenny Loggins, and I like a lot of, but when I tell you this man does not know anything after the 1990s, and actually the 1990s might be pushing it, I introduced him to some ludicrous songs. The reason I'm not going to say in this podcast, but okay. We have a lot of fun on the road, and I was trying to introduce him to some rappers and get him a little bit more modern, but Matt is absolutely my guy and so funny. But 1970s music for life. Okay, Craig Ackerman. Craig
Hello Kitty
absolutely loves Hello Kitty and EDM music, and which is great. But when you look at Craig, you don't immediately think, hey, that guy would love Hello Kitty and EDM. It's just, he has very eclectic interests, and he's so funny. And Ryan is too. Fun fact about Ryan, you'll hear me on the broadcast sometimes say, welcome to this edition of Ryan's Friends. And that is because Ryan Hollins, between playing in the NBA, being involved in the video game Mad World, he owns part of a clothing company called New Music Clothing. He is from LA, and just being in LA and knowing the LA scene, Ryan Hollins knows more random people than anybody I've ever met in my life. And so there's your Ryan fun fact. Welcome to this edition of Ryan's Friends. You never know who Ryan will be talking to courtside, and they're just the best. You spend more time with these people than you do your family during the season. So I feel super fortunate, and they're all just, and they all would have plenty of fun facts about me, which.
Who's the best karaoke singer between the four of you?
Me, and it's not close.
Okay.
Is the human jukebox. And as Craig maybe point out on the broadcast, I didn't need the words. We did a karaoke night, me, Matt, Ryan, and Craig in Toronto. We rented out a karaoke room, and we all sang anywhere from 8 to 12 songs. And it is epic. And I did put the list out on Twitter, and
videos unfortunately have not been shared.
Videos have not been shared, but I feel like Rockets fans vote on a poll who had the best karaoke song list.
Yeah, I remember you won at the very end. And no, just to follow up quickly on Craig, he is fascinating to me simply based on the extent of his hobbies. So obviously Craig he's a fantastic broadcaster and he does his homework. You can tell he watches, not just Rockets games, but other teams as well. He's dialed in. But his story, so obviously he's got his home life, but growing up, he was not a basketball guy. He was a baseball player.
Big time. Now
he plays hockey still, as I understand it. He's like a rec league guy in the off season. So he grew up playing baseball. He plays hockey. His home, in addition to, being married and everything that comes with that, his home is basically a zoo, as I understand it. With, they're huge animals.
Multiple animals, yes.
So, I'm someone I have 2 or 3 hobbies, and that sort of fulfills me and keeps me going. It feels like Craig has 18 hobbies. It's just ridiculous. How does he have enough time in the day?
They're just random, right? Your house
they're just
zoo, and you play hockey. I, by the way, am desperate to meet to watch him play hockey, and I really want to watch him get into a fight. I feel like Craig could scrap it out. I feel like he could scrap it out. Faux show.
But really, I thought. I mean, I'm not saying he couldn't, hold his own, but I totally thought he was he totally struck me as total pacifist. He'd do anything before he got into a fight. But if he plays hockey, I mean, I'm obviously from Europe.
You have to be able to fight if you play hockey.
Yeah.
You have to be able to. I don't care, even if it's rec league. But no, I mean, those 3 are so funny and so nice. And when you start a new job, you're really, especially one like this, you rely on your coworkers in some ways to help you, and they've all just been great about helping me out. So I love them all dearly.
Yeah, I think obviously, being from across the ocean, I've had a few opportunities to interact with both Craig and Ryan. I actually, the first year I started doing stuff, kind of content with the Rockets. We were doing the spaces, and Craig once, Ryan used to be there basically every week, but Craig once showed up and was there for 6 hours, something crazy like that. I was like, there's no way he's been here for that long. And actually, I think I learned, if I'm not mistaken, obviously don't want to put out fake news, but I think I had something in common with him, because he said that he loved to get home after the game and just eat dry cereal. He would eat cereal without the milk, which is something that I do.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so those are more, Craig fun facts. If I'm not, I hope I'm not getting that wrong, but I'm pretty sure that was the case.
I remember that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And
dry cereal, Craig Ackerman, add it to the list of odd hobbies he has.
So yeah. I remember, because that was before I was actually going to go to Houston, and I asked him if he had any cereal that he would recommend, because. Yeah, obviously cereal there is much different from cereal here in Europe. It's much more sugary typically in the US. But yeah, let's just move on to a different question. So I see, obviously have the chance to do stuff with the Rockets, but you also do stuff with the Astros, and sometimes you fill in and you do the role that Julia does. How different is it to do, to go from an NBA broadcast to an MLB one? Obviously the pace is very different, I imagine.
Yeah, filling in for Kevin Eschenfelder in studio, and then Julia as field reporter. Baseball is just a different sport, and I think I feel super fortunate to be able to do both. Obviously, having covered the Astros with KPRC and their, amazing years that they have had. When I arrived in 2019, one of the first things I covered was the World Series to the Nationals that they unfortunately lost. But no, look, it's Houston sports are on the up and up. And so I don't cover the Texans, but I used to. And to see what they've been able to do with CJ and D'Amico has been amazing. And, as far as differences, the preparation is similar. It can be longer days at the ballpark depending on how long a game goes. And especially when I'm in studio doing pregame and postgame, our postgame is an hour long. So fans have been long gone by the time we're off and walking out to our car. But no, best of luck to the Astros. I strongly feel like they're going to have a good year. It's just a franchise that always figures it out. And, I give a ton of credit to Dana Brown for that Yusei Kikuchi move that was kind of criticized, but it worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, the set you all have for the Astros gave you exposure to a virtual tornado in a way that you have not had at Community Center. So,
my gosh, yeah, doing what's it called? It wasn't quite a hurricane because it wasn't
derecho.
It was
yeah.
derecho. Yeah,
I call it a virtual tornado because that's basically
it's essentially that. Yeah, I mean, it was like there's a little bit of a place in the roof at Minute Maid where the water can get in, and then honestly, what it is more so than that was that fans were coming in and the wind and the water was blowing in, and then there was also a leak. So I never thought I'd do an indoor show like be wet, but I tried to remember to get the sponsors in, give the people what they paid for, and my whole thing, and I'm always like this, honestly, and I think people probably know by now, is I think that the viewers are usually smart, and so I'm not going to pretend like I'm not getting wet and like nothing's happening. So I just try to kind of a sense of humor about it and say, hey, clearly this is happening and there's some weather, and tried to shed a light on the first responders that we saw outside that were helping people get in and risking their lives. So yeah, definitely check that one off of the broadcaster bingo card.
Yeah, so a couple of fun facts about that. I saw you in person when that was going down, but I was panicked myself. In fact, seeing your eyes when I knew you were live on air sort of freaked me out more. So to peel back the curtain, my wife and I were going to that game as fans. It was just a Thursday night, and so tickets were cheap. They were playing the A's. So we're like, hey, we'll get some good tickets and go in. So obviously you can see what the clouds look like. And so I had the good foresight to drop Lori off at the door. I was like, hey, if it starts raining, I'm not going to ask her to get soaked. So I dropped her out. She was already in. And so I parked. And at that point, you can see, I mean, it's, 6:30 and it's May. So it's almost the longest days of the year. But it is pitch dark on just a few blocks away. And so it's obvious this is going to be really effing bad. And so when the wind starts, not to 100 miles an hour yet, you can just feel what's coming. I swear to y'all, I had to have been running a 4.40, and I am not a fast guy, but I knew what was coming, and I have never run that fast in my life because I parked the car. Thankfully, there was street parking. I don't know, God, if I had not found a parking spot, that would have been, I don't want to imagine about that. But yeah, thankfully, parked on the street, running in, and there was a little bit of a backup at security. But a hat tip to the staff at Minute Maid Park. They realized pretty quickly now, because of course there was all sorts of signs and collateral blowing around. It didn't take very long to realize that this is really serious. But within a couple of seconds, they literally just waved us all inside. They didn't scan tickets, not any of that. They recognized security immediately. And they're just like, just get in, just trying to make sure people were safe. And I ran in that Snurfield entrance. And so, I saw you because you were live on the broadcast at that time. And I saw, the way you and Michael Bourne were looking. And I was like, yeah, this is pretty bad. And so, so I was a guest that night at Minute Maid. I was soaked, but whatever.
What a memorable night for many, many reasons.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought about it in recent days because another fun fact from that night. So our fence, unfortunately, at the townhome where Lori and I live, got blown down, and we didn't get it repaired until a few days ago. By the way, shout out to Sean Bajani, brother of Alikan Bajani, Rockets Insider on Twitter. Sean Bajani is a host for Sports Radio 610. He does some fencing work on the side, and we actually used him a few days ago to fix our fence. So first off, shout out to
brothers until you really just said that just now.
Wow. Okay, well, I'm peeling back the curtain on a lot of things.
You really are.
But yeah, so shout out to Sean Bajani for doing a nice job. We got a new fence just for timing reasons, and we were on vacation, and you wanted to get closer to the end of hurricane season. Didn't want to, put up a fence when we couldn't even, ensure it would last a year. But we got that fixed in the last few days, and so hopefully we are, at least for a few months, beyond hurricane and derecho-related chaos. Anyway, so I want to ask you one more question related to the Astros. Actually, it's going to be related to the Astros, the Rockets, and the Texans, because you have experience covering all of these teams. And there is an easy sort of cheat answer to this. But Which of the three do you think wins a championship next?
Oh, a championship.
There is a cheat answer to this.
Well, that's tricky for a lot of reasons.
But if you say the Astros, then you're just being optimistic because they are the next team that has an opportunity to win a championship this October.
Well, yeah, they literally win one within what, like a month and a half?
Right.
So it would technically be, so they would be the first ones that have the opportunity. I love what CJ Stroud is doing in Houston and D'Amico and just all of the moves that Nick Caserio made, unbelievable. Masterclass in how to turn things around. The Rockets are, and the Texans are on the same page as the Rockets, right? Like both hire former players with a lot of credentials and that players respect. Both have great GMs. And so, and then the Astros have been great for a long time. So yeah, that's a tricky question. And then the Western Conference is obviously tough, but you have the Rockets that are getting better every year. And I think that trend is going to continue. So not sure who I would say next. I mean, the cheat answers could be the right one with the Astros. But look, health is everything. The way that the Western Conference is tough, in the NBA, the AFC is very difficult in the NFL. So there are a lot of things that have to happen in a franchise, health, timing, in order for you to win a championship. But I think all of Houston sports should feel good about where they're at right now. And if you're wondering, Vanessa, is that a non-answer? It's not meant to be a non-answer, but I just think that there's a lot that could go into any of it.
Fair. And we should note that none of the three teams, now, don't want to not acknowledge the Dynamo and the Dash, but I think, longtime Houston residents view the Astros, the Rockets, and, well, now the Texans, used to be the Oilers, but, basketball, baseball, and football as the big three. None of them currently have or had a losing season. And it's been a while since, I think it's the first time in the 2020s that we could say that all three had winning years at the same time. And they all seem to be, well, certainly the Rockets and Texans, but, to an extent, even if the Astros are a little bit on the downslope, you have Jordan Alvarez, Kyle Tucker, Framber Valdez.
Oh my gosh, it's ridiculous.
Right. It's not like they're going to fall off a cliff anytime soon. So.
Yeah, no, it's a really good time for Houston sports. And I know, you and I have discussed this before where I kind of laugh when people are like, oh, Houston sports, this is the most Houston sports thing ever. I know Houston sports have had some bad luck, but there have been some really great moments too. And I just think it's such a special time right now, with all three franchises for sure.
Yeah, and just as a quick update, since we always do this when we record while the Astros are playing, the Astros are currently 2-0 down in the second inning. Hopefully, by the time you're listening to this podcast, the score is turned around. But yeah, just get that tradition out of the way for the podcast. My next question was actually going to be, put your basketball analyst hat on. If fate of the universe is on the line and you have to call it, do you think the Rockets make the playoffs this?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that they were close to making the play-in tournament last year. So I think that there's a really great possibility that they do. I don't have to tell anybody listening to this who knows basketball, but the Western Conference is tough. So is going to play a part in that. Hopefully the guys can stay healthy, and Alana's going to have to go the Rockets' way, but I absolutely don't think it's a stretch at all.
The one follow-up that I would have to that, do you believe the Jalen Green we saw in the second half of last season, I'm not going to say March because, anyone can have a good month, but really if you go back to the middle of January, it's really the last 40 games. He was a different player once he got accustomed to, I think, the new system, his new teammates, Ime Udoka. He was the guy who had the most changed around him relative to the last couple of years. He was also one of the few guys that had multiple years of experience with the Rockets prior to the Ime hire. So he had, perhaps some of the most bad habits to shed. But the player he was from about mid-January onward, I think Rockets fans, if they felt like, if they were confident that that guy was going to be who they see this fall, and hopefully even a little bit better, because obviously he's had a good offseason. We know he led the mini camp a couple of weeks ago. So it's a contract year. There's all sorts of incentives for him to be who he was down the stretch of last year. But I just feel like of all the guys on the roster, he's the most important variable. So As someone that's gotten to know him, as someone that's seen him behind the scenes, how confident are you that he's truly, figured it out or is in the process of figuring it out and is thus going to be the guy that can, lead the team forward?
Yeah, last year before the season started, he told me on camera that he knew that he needed to be an all-around player, that he didn't just want to be somebody that could score. He wanted to be a better leader. And I think that he has matured a lot. And when you look at, what he did in California and the leadership role that he's really taken on, I have no doubt that he is going to continue to mature. And I know fans don't always want to hear this, and I get it because it's so hard to be patient when you're a fan, but he is only 22 years old. And so I'm really looking forward to what he can do, his development. And I think it was a big off season for him. And I think it was a very important off season for him. And, I've heard nothing but good things. So I'm really excited for Jalen.
Yeah. And I low-key thought one of the most revealing quotes of last season came right after the trade deadline. So as I'm sure you know, Rafael during the year doesn't have a ton of media availabilities. He does during the offseason when they sign free agents, on draft night, on, the last few years, the Rockets have been very lucky. We definitely have to retire Houston sports with as lucky as the Rockets have been in the draft lottery the last 4 years. I calculated it. The Rockets are actually in the top 6% of outcomes when you look at, the draft picks they've gotten, including Reed Shepherd this year, jumping up from 9 or 10 pre-lottery to the 3rd overall pick, and then Reed looking brilliant at Summer League. So, yeah, we definitely need to retire Houston sports with the way things are, or hashtag Houston sports, the way things are looking
things
right
are
now.
Trending up.
Yes,
100%.
But to the point on Jalen, it's not to overlook other players. It's just there's a ton of depth on this roster. Like at the center position, Alperen Sengun was the Rockets' best player last year. He's really good. Yet Steven Adams and Jock Landale are good players as well. There are alternatives if, God forbid, Alp turns an ankle again. You look at the wing positions and you have, well, I should say wing/forward, but you've got Dylan, you've got Jabari Smith, you've got Tari Eason, you've got, Amen Thompson. We'll see if he's a point guard or, an off-ball guy the way he was to end last year, but at least in terms of his body type, you can throw him into that mix as well. The point is there's a lot of depth. The quote that really resonated with me was at the deadline, and Rafael got memed for it at the time, but he was asked about Jalen Green, and he said, Jalen has been and continues to be on paper a great fit with us. He has a skill set that isn't really replicated on this roster. And I think where that's so true, with other positions on the roster, I don't know that you can withstand like season-long injuries to key players, like hopefully Tari Eason has put whatever happened last year behind him. But there's lots of depth, even at point guard. Look, you have Fred VanVleet, who's really good, but Thompson hopefully will play some at point guard this year. You drafted Reed Shepherd. With Jalen Green, and what they're asking him to do is sort of that tip of the spear, that lead dog on the perimeter, the top scorer. There's not really anyone else on this team as currently constructed that can do what he does. And I thought them getting to 41 and 41 last year, a big part of that, Jalen's durability, playing all 82 games. I know that was something that he took very seriously, getting his body in the right shape, and he was able to do. And I just feel like the reason we're fixating on Jalen, obviously we know the highs are highs, the lows have been low, and he's going to try and, make it to where the peaks and valleys aren't as extreme. But I think when you just look at his skill set, and Rafael sort of got, memed for it at the time because going into the All-Star break was when Jalen was on one of his, cold stretches, and there was some talk about, well, will they take him out of the starting lineup? Thankfully they didn't. And then after the All-Star break, they increased the pace, they shot more threes. And we know what happened with Jalen Green taking off in March. No, it wasn't because Sengun went out. He was already playing a lot better before that. Again, the pace, the shooting more threes, lots of factors beyond just the Sengun absence. But I just feel like going into this year, Jalen's the one guy that you can't really replace. So that's why I'm looking at him. Not going to say he's their best player, but he might be their most important player just because his skill set isn't really replicated. Does that make sense to you?
And totally. And what you mentioned earlier when you were asking me about Rafael and Ime and the interviews I do with them, the beautiful thing is they're both so candid and so honest. And, for Rafael to say that, people can meme it all they want, but it does mean something. And I think the core young guys are all going to take leaps every year. That's part of being such a young player. Like, people have to remember Cam Whitmore was like 19 when the Rockets drafted him, and Jabari only did 1 year at Auburn. And so it is a painful thing as sports fans to wait and watch the development. And of course you wish that they developed sooner, but you look at Amin Thompson ending the year with a triple-double, and you look at what Jalen was able to do at certain points during the second half of the year. And if it's anybody on this podcast about what Alfred Sengun was able to do, and then, what we've seen from Reed in Summer League, like, there are a lot of reasons for fans to be excited. And the thing that I've noticed, and a lot of fans have talked about with Ime, we touched on it earlier, is if you're playing well and you're giving effort and you're playing defense and you are producing, you are going to be on the floor. I don't care who you are. So I'm really looking forward to this season. It is going to be a huge year for JN's growth. And everything that I've heard from traders and from people in the league is that he's working really hard. And I'm certainly excited to see the results of that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, I think that's everything on my list. Paulo, going once, going twice. Anything else you want to ask before we wrap up?
No, just to thank Vanessa for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Vanessa, thank you so much
Thank you guys
for doing this. And if you're not already following her on Twitter/X, I don't know what you're doing with your life, but at Sports Vanessa is the handle, correct?
Yes, it is. Thank you guys. I appreciate you, and you guys have such a great podcast, and I look forward to seeing you both as the season starts.
Yep, absolutely. And of course, to our listeners, you can watch Vanessa all the time on Space City Home Network. Obviously, she'll be a part of the game broadcast in the fall. But again, with the switch to Space City Home Network, there is a lot more off-season content as well. So keep your eyes peeled for those Rockets All Access episodes, the updates to social media. You can tell that Space City is a little more committed than, previous iterations of the network to being, a 12-month around the full calendar year media outlet for the Rockets. And so I think that dedication shows. And so you can find that on their certainly TV channel, but social media handles as well. Anyway, that's where we'll wrap things for today. If you want more content from us before our next show, the best place as always to get it is online. You can follow me on Twitter/X at Ben Dubose, Paulo at Paulo Alves NBA, and this show at The Logger Line. And of course, if you go to the Logger Line's page on Twitter/X, you can find our link tree, which has links to our distribution partners like Apple, Google, and Spotify. If you'd be kind enough to subscribe, leave a positive review at your location of choice. We'd greatly appreciate it. Also on that same link tree, you can find friends, sponsors, partners of the program. You can find links to their content as well. USA Today's Rockets Wire, Carback Brewing, Sports Talk 790. Hit up those links and show them some love in addition to us. All right, with those plugs complete, we'll adjourn for today. For Paulo and Vanessa, I'm Ben. Thanks as always for listening, and please come back soon for another new episode of The Logger Line.